My name is Matt Vojacek. I am the creative director and founder of an animation studio called Made by Things in Columbus, Ohio.
So I want to start out with chatting a little bit about if you could describe the specific types of problems that you solve and what kind of customers you consider to be your ideal customers or clients.
Yeah, so let's see here. It's a little bit weird for me because for me in the beginning it was let's try to figure out how to be an artist for a living, right? That was the problem that I was initially trying to solve, right? A very selfish one, but it's one that I was trying to solve. Trying to understand what does it take to do that. Um, Growing up in a place where people are mostly, doing manufacturing, art, creativity is not necessarily a career path. That was strictly a hobby, one that generally ends when you're about 15 or so. And for me, it didn't end. So it came to, okay, let's figure out how to do all these things. Let's try to understand these paths that are available. And once I got through college and got my first job, then I started to realize, oh, like this isn't philanthropy and people just supporting creative people, right? This was um there's people that truly benefit from the creative work that I do, that my team does. So for me early on, it was animation. That was the thing that I wanted to just just be able to do in some capacity or another. Like most kids that went to art school at this point, we all wanted to work at Pixar. We wanted to, you know, create movies. But again, once I started seeing the clients that we were helping early on, it was kind of surprising, honestly. There was one day where I created a series of probably 6 to 10 um, like short animated explainer videos for a financial company. And again, I'm not thinking anything of it. About 2 or 3 weeks after we sent over the deliverables for that project, they called us back and they're like, hey, because of those videos, they were directly responsible for well over $1 million worth of investment. And I was like, okay. Like there was a flip of a switch at that day, basically. And from that day forward, I was like, okay, like I'm been looking at this the wrong way this whole time, where it's not just how do I make cool stuff. It's like there is a direct benefit that people are seeing from the work that I'm doing, and I want to understand that. Um, so, over time, started introducing different things into the process and different ideas for product itself. Um, but basically, at this point right now, it's helping a variety of companies be able to use marketing um, and advertising in the most effective way that they possibly can. And looking at things from a strategic perspective, but also having the production knowledge of building things that are truly unique and actually tell stories. Not in these simple like whiteboard animation type of things, but like to really dive deep into other people's customers, understand the journey that they go through, and be able to try to find the stories, whether it's with their customers or with their company itself. So if I was to simplify it into the lowest common denominator, it would be helping people tell their stories, helping them tell the stories that they don't even realize that they have. And again, sometimes, most of the time, what we do is with animation, but sometimes we'll do live action video. But ultimately, we're looking at how does it impact a company that we are working for? Everyone has different goals. Sometimes it's, hey, we want to get more awareness for this new product that we have or our company. Sometimes it's, hey, we want to drive more sales, we want more interaction. It really varies quite a bit, but um, I'd say most commonly we're working with healthcare, financial, um, technology a little bit. Sometimes it's a combination of all three of those things. it gets really weird. But we've even been throwing a little bit of education into that mix lately. So we don't specialize in any one specific sector. It's really about working with people that value the work that we do when it comes to video and animation.
Is there anything that you've seen? Obviously, it's not all one vertical, but like the companies or clients that value the kind of work you do. When we think about ideal customer, a lot of times it's not about what industry they're in, right? It's about maybe even the personality of the company or the psychographics or whatever we want to say, right? Have you noticed anything that they have in common? Is there anything like that you've gleaned of, oh, now in hindsight, I see that this is the kind of company when I look at what they do that really is probably maybe a better fit than this other company that I see, just even when you're looking at it cold?
That's a great question. It's one, honestly, if I knew the answer to it, it would make life way easier for me. um, but if we're looking for what do they all have in common, it's really tough because we're generally hired by marketing teams. So one of the things I'm always looking at is the size of the marketing team. Do they have people on their staff that already do this stuff? Now, I always tell people, I'm like, okay, even if you have a staff, chances are they don't have the same expertise we do. Um, they could have a team of 20 people, but even if they have that, most of these people are working on like really simple, just motion ads and stuff like that. I'm like, chances are they don't have this level of expertise. So one of the things that we generally look for would be the size of what that team is. What is the makeup of that team? So if they have 20 people, chances are they're like, oh, we already do that. I'm like, okay, I'm not even going to argue with you. Like, enjoy. Like maybe it does work for them. The thing that's a variable in every case is that some people on marketing teams lean very heavy in certain areas, and it's usually things that they're comfortable with. So some of them might lean have more heavy into things like print or live action video or animation. Like it just kind of varies based on the person and their own personal experience, it seems to me. The other thing that I look at is one of the things that always helps me determine the size of the marketing teams is understanding what their revenue is on a yearly basis. Where initially, when I started out, I was working with just anybody. Like sometimes I'm working with like business owners. And usually when that's the case, it just got a little bit messy and fuzzy. So I like to work for, at this point, I like to work for companies that the owner's just far too busy to to have these kinds of conversations. I like to work with like the head of the marketing teams. So I generally try to look for companies between the probably 25 to 50 million a year range. Um, so this is the first time I'm ever saying any of this stuff, but like these are all like little things that I've sort of learned over the last 10 years of like, all right, what is the common things? Like this project worked out really well. Like why did that one do so well and this one maybe not as much? So it's trying to find companies that are the right size for you. Now, at could we do work for billion-dollar companies? Sure. But again, they have the big marketing teams and they generally want everything to be done in-house and they don't really want to contract the outside vendor, basically.
Or they have
Uh,
an agency, right? Or they have a
or they have
house
an agency.
agency and record or whatever, and then that's being handled.
Right. So this kind of, there's two ways that we sort of work with people. Our preferred way is to work directly with clients like this or working directly with the businesses. But we also work with through agencies as well. So when we do work with bigger companies, we have a connection with the agency team. So then usually we're working with creative directors that come up with the idea of like, hey, we want to use video or animation in some way. But even agencies, they don't have the same expertise that we have. So it's always weird. Like I'm always telling people like if you go through an agency for video, they're going to end up contacting us and you're just kind of spending a little bit extra. And again, maybe it's worth it. I don't really know, but I just know that we're getting hired by agencies and directly with companies. And I gotta imagine that one is a bit cheaper than the other.
Yeah, there's little less of a markup, right?
Right,
When
right,
it's
right.
just through you, yeah. Well, it brings up a really important point. I mean, you bring up many important points, I think, when it comes to homing in on who your ideal customer, and ideal customer is tricky sometimes, right? Because like, you know, it's not ever about perfect, but it's about like the type of customers where you know you're going to be most successful with. You're going to have the highest chance of serving well. That you're going to, you know, just all these different kind of variables that are different for different business owners or different companies, right? Some that might value just the revenue more, right? So, but that comes through that process of discovery that you mentioned, and I think a lot of people are in a similar situation that, you know, whether they're an artist or not, they have something they really care about doing and they love doing. And the trick is, how do you find that overlap, right? Because it's
Right.
easy to get caught up. I see this with writers all the time, right? There's a ton of copywriters and content writers out there, right? But a lot of them, they're basically offering all the same thing, right? And it's like, how do you do something where it satisfies your own creative needs and passions and all that, but at the same time realize that there's other people out there doing video and motion graphics and visual stuff. How do you carve out that piece that's just for you? And you recently, very recently, posted about I guess about, you know, LinkedIn, you posted the other day that a few years back you weren't quite as booked out as you had hoped to be, right? It was a little stressful. Maybe there was
Right.
a little,
Right. Right.
you know, feast and famine cycle going on. But more recently, you feel like that's gotten much stronger. And you mentioned something about the one thing that's really helped you is to focus on one problem at a time, or to get very, very focused on like maybe the most important problems. What of those do you think are relevant to what we're talking about, specifically about focusing your marketing, focusing your effort on the right types of customers or the right message that you're sending out, that kind of thing?
Right. Something that I see a lot is, people decide that they want to jump into a creative career. Maybe it's not even just creative careers. I think it's just all of them, where we want to see results of things relatively quick. And we think that, okay, if we get a 4-year degree in something, then the following year we should be able to just jump right in it and be able to be super successful. And I just don't think that that's the way that it works. I think that we are rewarded in our careers based on the amount of focus and attention, and honestly, as unhealthy as it might be, the obsession that we have with something. And one of the things for me was trying to be as intentional as I could about building a business. So many people that I talk to, especially in the creative world, they almost tell stories of falling into it, just sort of happened by accident. And I was like, I can't learn anything from these people. Like, I'm trying to intentionally do this. Like, who do I even, I mean, like I was saying, like the path for me to go into creativity in general, nobody around me. I had to try to figure out all these things for myself. Or find the community anyway, myself. So, um, so for me, it was like, okay, let's take this one step at a time. Let's figure out, what do you not know? What is working, what is not working? And allow yourself to obsess about these things for a long period of time. And um, one of the things that I started doing was journaling every single day. I started this in, I want to say, early 2017. So every day since then, I journal, and it's generally about business related stuff. My wife calls it my diary, but it's not a diary. um, but like it's a way for me to kind of check in and to see, okay, where are things right now, to create a hypothesis for what I think could actually move the needle on certain things. So in that post, it's really related to two separate things. It's related to marketing and it's related to product. I mean, there's other things that are, related to a business, such as human resources and accounting, all that stuff. I write about all this stuff. But the two biggest things were definitely product and marketing. So, from a marketing perspective, it's okay, who are you targeting at any given point? Okay, I had a conversation with this person. I think it's going to go well. These are the things that I need to look out for. Oh, that call didn't go well at all. Why did that not go well? And I think that's probably part of the other thing is that sometimes it's really hard for people to critique themselves aggressively. Um, not to say that like I'm like super special in any of this stuff, but throughout the last, 10, 15 years, I've sort of learned how to kind of take a step back, almost kind of look at myself and the work that I'm doing as an outside party, if that makes any sense, and be able to give good feedback to myself. Um, if I had a superpower of any sort, it's obsession. Again, it's probably not the healthiest thing, but it's okay. Like maybe I have an obsessive personality. How do I translate that into how it can, or how can I use that to my advantage, right? I was horrible in school, uh, but I managed to find those qualities that were bad for me then to be able to use them for me now. So again, so from a marketing perspective, we're talking about that, and then from a product standpoint, it was, I knew what I was offering, I knew what I'm able to do, but I never felt like I was wrapping it up in this perfect package, basically. It always seemed confusing for people. Like if I'm like in meetings with them, I'm like, oh yeah, we do motion design and animation. They're like, what? And I'm like, okay, so this thing that I've been saying my entire life just makes no sense to them. Like it's either them or me. But whenever I start having that conversation more and more and people are like confused by it, I'm like, okay, like now I need to kind of take some time for an education component to this thing. Like whenever I'm going into this, like I'm not selling animation. I'm selling the results of what animation can give, basically. Um, and one of the other things I talked about in that post was, whenever early on I was booking out like a week in advance, and that is a problem. That is a major problem. Unfortunately, I got really used to it. I mean, still relatively used to it, but this idea where I don't know, I guess you just kind of hope that things work out. Um, Again, you're like, when I first started, when I went full time, it was I had nothing. I had nothing lined up when I first went full time. I left a pretty decent job that was pretty close to six figures a year, and I'm like, great, let's let's not do that anymore, and let's try to figure out this thing. And the first job that I took on lasted for a week, maybe two, and I got $200 from it. And I was like, okay, let's see here. The math on this is not adding up exactly. so so that was the first probably massive problem that I was trying to figure out. And I'm not saying that I have the perfect solution for it right now, but what I'm saying is that there's little incremental change that has been made over the course of 5 to 6 years that you start to it's hard to see the result. Like there's probably no one thing that you can just do and all of a sudden everything just changes for your company. Outside of maybe like a viral social media post. And even then, I still always argue that those are relatively temporary things, right? It's sort of like winning the lottery when you don't know how to manage money. Like, okay, well, like that's great, you won $200 million, but you still don't know how to manage money, so you blow it all in a year and you're like, oh crap. And it's kind of the same when it comes to business and when it comes to marketing like that, where if you have this viral post and whatever. So yeah, so in those early days, it was, looking a week or two out and realizing that that's not sustainable. Like maybe I have the energy at this moment to just be hopeful and just wait for the next thing to come in. And it generally did. I mean, there's definitely times where when I hoped something would come in, everything would fall through. Um, and it led to some really, really just big moments, big decision points of like, okay, like I have a huge problem right now, and it's I don't have any clients. Like, what? How am I supposed to solve? Like, I feel like I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to. I'm doing everything that everybody's saying, but it's not working. So, like, I think that's the point where I think a lot of business owners have that point, and a lot of them realize at that moment right there, is this worth it? And a lot of them say no, and that's totally understandable because That's, I don't know, that's the difference right there. Like you hit this wall. It looks different for every industry, every business, I feel like, but when you hit this wall of like this is really difficult, and I can't just ask somebody and get the answer. Like now, I guess I sort of see it as like this path through life, right? Where early on it's kind of easy to see the paths and easy to see the people that have been on the path before you. But then you get to a certain point where you now have to carve your own path through things. And you can't really, I mean, you can still have a mentor and you should be able to ask people, but they don't know the answer. And it's both a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's good because you've pushed yourself to the extreme. You're now in the unknown. And that's amazing to get that far. But at the same time, it's kind of lonely because I mean, you can look back and you can help other people along your path, but there's no one to reach out, no one to pull you anymore, right? Um, so that's, I mean, that's what writing has helped me with, and this iterative process of like trying to figure out these little things. So again, I'm not going to say there's like one thing that helped us now be able to book a year in advance, but what I will say is it had a lot less to do with marketing and more to do with product. Of early on, we were just, oh, you want a video? Cool, let's do that. Let's do a video. Yeah, we're done in a month. All right, well, now what? Like there you go, you have your thing. So for us, it was, well, we need longer term relationships with people. We need to focus a bit more on strategy and less on production. So now we kind of do both of those things together. And that's what allowed us to be able to say, like, oh, okay, you want an explainer video. Like, that's cool, but what's the real goal here? And then they're like, okay, well, yeah, we're trying to gain awareness. And it's like, great. If you're trying to gain awareness, I think I have an idea of what actually might work better than an explainer video. So we started doing a discovery process with people where if they ask for one thing, they basically pay us for a week to come up with ideas and possible solutions for the problems that we discuss. And I basically put in front of them like a menu of ideas, essentially. The initial idea that they came to us for, it's usually in there somewhere, but sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 15 different ideas. And it's like, great, now build your own campaign here. Like, if this is truly your goal, like, sure, this one thing that you asked for, it's going to work. But if we add on these 6 other things, I just become a lot more confident that this is going to work incredibly well at solving your goal. So by doing things like that, I started seeing that, like, okay, people were actually more interested in longer campaigns with us rather than just the one video. So by doing that, we extended some of our clients that in what would be a 1 month project is now 12 months, 18 months. And by doing things like that, it then, we still do projects occasionally where it's like just this one-off production kind of thing. But if we use some of those bigger projects to kind of gauge the overall health of the company, it's a lot easier to make decisions kind of moving forward.
There's so much that I would want to just dive into and unpack all of that. The main thing that really pops into my head was, first of all, the obsessive personality. I can relate to that. And I don't journal per se, but boy, do I have some mind maps and files somewhere, right?
Yep.
So I'm always like recording little audio notes. And my wife is constantly like,
Right.
she's like, what? Okay, whatever, like, shh, I have a thought, and I'm typing it in my phone. It's like, whatever, But I love that you brought that up, because what I see a lot is it's so easy to get caught up into just default autopilot, right? And whether it's journaling, whether it's whatever it is, meditation, looking out the ocean,
Right.
whatever it is, that's just a moments of introspection and asking yourself questions. And what you said is taking a look at it from the outside perspective. And you mentioned whether some of it is like these changes have been marketing related, some of them have been product related. I look at them as being the same thing, because you were able to explain. You said one of the challenges was at the beginning, you would talk about stuff from your perspective. Oh, we do videos, we do motion graphics, whatever it is, motion design. And people are like, I don't know. A, I don't know what that is. B, it doesn't really mean anything to me.
Right.
Certainly not as much to them as it does to you, who have spent years crafting
Right.
that, right? So that right, I want to just kind of take all of what you said and really what I feel like was one of the main takeaways for me, and I could always, for me, if I had my own business to learn from that, is that taking the time on a regular basis, however you do it, to look at things outside of your own perspective and ask yourself questions. Why does this matter to them? Whether
Right.
you're selling creative services, whether you're selling financial advice, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. And that to me is the core of what this show is about, and what I with my clients about is how do you make your messaging relevant to them? How do you focus what, and the messaging could be a video. It doesn't have to be words on a page, right? So all that stuff was great. And honestly, the first person I can think of that really was talking about a journaling perspective on this, like that kind of, no, really, like
Yeah.
that kind of like thoughtfulness that goes into it, of not just like, again, relying on the best practices that you see on LinkedIn and going, oh, I should
Right.
do this. It's not just tactical, right? Um, and
Right.
explaining things from what you do from their perspective. I just really want to put like a really like overly fine point on that for listeners, right?
Yeah. It's one of these things where I think everyone has an optimal way of working through things like this. And I think early on I was kind of doing the same where I was like, oh, okay, like this is how other people are like doing all this stuff and trying to do it. So much of it just felt really unnatural to me for whatever reason. And I don't know what really happened there, but it was like, okay, let's figure out. I think it is just understanding what are your own strengths and weaknesses. And for me, again, just focusing on those strengths of like, okay, I am relatively obsessive here. Um, Not necessarily a strength or weakness, but I don't have any internal dialogue. I've found that this is uncommon, I guess. I'm just learning about this over the last couple of years. And I thought it was fascinating. I'm like, I don't have a voice in my head. I don't talk to myself in my head. I don't think through those things. I visualize different scenarios.
Speaking of marketing problems, I wanted to get real tactical now for the last couple of minutes as we wrap up. Can you share any, and you already shared a lot of great stuff, but any specific tips for other founders, other entrepreneurs? They're trying to figure out how to shift their marketing. They really want to focus on ideal customers, and they want to move away from maybe that bad fit customer that they're getting a little bit too many of those types of customers in the mix. Um, any last tips, words of advice you can share?
Ooh, there's a lot there. I guess two things that I'll say is one, don't feel bad working with the people that you know aren't your perfect fit. They're kind of unavoidable, especially early on. One of the things that we've done is we develop a list of red flags. And it's not that like if somebody has one red flag, they're immediately out, right? It's just there to kind of remind you like, ooh, hey, this person's like four red flags. Um, and it's kind of taking the time to see early on, like, okay, what is it to like to work with these people? But it's also taking on the responsibility that there are no bad clients. It's your fault for taking them on, right? That's generally how I look at things too, where I'm like, I will never blame a client for something. I will always blame myself for either taking them on or not educating properly. So, it still happens every now and then where it's just like, oh, okay, this was just a bad fit. Like we thought it was good, it was bad. At what point should we have known that it wasn't a good fit? And then, we talk about it with the whole team and we're like, all right, so they said this thing early on. And I think that maybe we just kind of glossed over it and we didn't think enough about it. And those are the things that we can't do. So that becomes one of our red flags from that point. Um, but sometimes you also learn in that process of like, oh, you know what? If I just had a video or if I had a page that just explained how this works, or maybe I'm positioning incorrectly altogether and they thought I was going to do this, but I really do this. So you can learn things from what you perceive to be red flags. And to me, that's, a lot of your marketing effort should be dedicated to solving that problem specifically of, okay, like that wasn't the right fit. Um, Maybe there's industries that you're like, okay, why does this industry keep coming out to me? early on for me, I I made the decision of just offering everything that I could do. So this was 2015 or so, maybe 14, somewhere around there. I was like, okay, I can develop web pages. I weirdly enough have that ability. I can do branding, I do logos, I can do video, I can do wedding photography. Like I've done so many weird things. And I thought it was the best idea to just toss it all out there and let people come to me for whatever. And it was confusing for people for sure. To the point where like I wanted to do animation, but nobody was actually coming to me for animation. They kept coming to me for web development. And I'm like, what? I hate developing websites. Why do I keep doing this? And it took me a little over a year or two to just be like, you know what? I'm going to remove it from the website altogether. And it felt really good doing that. And at that point, nobody ever asked for it again. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, I felt like I was being punished. Like, it was the weirdest thing. But so I don't know, I guess it's thinking through product as well of like, what is the fit? When you find that person, no, I guess leaving all that behind, when you find the person that you're like, wow, this was an amazing client. This was perfect. I suppose you could have a list of green flags as well. So it's like, okay, here are the things that I'm looking for. Like, if I want to work with this person over and over and over again, like, let me describe them in my own words here. Let me journal about it. Let me write it somewhere, whatever. Um, but when you can start noticing those things, then you start to get a clearer idea of who to target. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where people, want to have this uber successful business right off the bat, and it just doesn't work that way. It might take you 10 years to figure out who you want to work with. So be prepared for 10 years of effort because that's just might be how long it takes, right? It's very much not this thing where you get to decide, okay, yes, I want a successful business, and it just sort of happens. Um, be willing to put the time in to define who that person is. Now, there's other people out there that'll have their insight of like, okay, this person is the best person to work with. You can choose to listen to them, but I think that's where things get weird again, where maybe you're on your own path here and you're looking to somebody on a different path altogether and see how they've done it. Like, don't be afraid to make your own decisions on who you want to work with. And also don't be afraid to mess up because you're going to. And I don't know, I think everyone wants to be perfect, but that's not what creates a successful business, especially early on. I mean, look at any company that has lasted for more than 5 years, and there's a lot of struggle early on. And I don't want to say it's intentional struggle, but it's just part of the admission price, I suppose. Um, Outside of all that stuff, what I would say from a marketing perspective, one of the things that I'm constantly journaling is sales funnels. And I'm always analyzing, okay, if we're working for somebody else, I'm like, all right, what's their sales funnel? How does this work? What are they doing to make people aware? How are they getting interaction with people? How are they building trust? How are they making sales? And how are they rewarding loyalty? So it's specifically those categories that I'm always looking at. And even this morning, I do it for myself too, for Made by Things. I'm like trying to figure out like, okay, where are we weak right now? Like here are all the awareness levels. Here's the interaction. Here's the building trust. Here's how we're making sales. Because truthfully, this year has been a bit below average. I think it's kind of across the board for everyone in marketing in general, but um, we're seeing less project leads. So for me, I'm like, okay, this is when it gets into, sorry, I probably go on for this for another hour, but um, this is when it gets into the real tough stuff is when something is working for you and then all of a sudden the game changes. The game doesn't give you any warnings, but it changes. And now you're trying to figure out, oh no, like I don't know how this thing works anymore. And it's sort of the same thing. If I won the lottery, I would have no idea. But I didn't win the lottery. I slowly built this. So I could always go back to an earlier chapter, if that's the easiest way to say this, and see like, okay, this is what I did to get through that. Going through COVID and, on the brink of everything breaking, right? Um, but I knew Like I had to do something in that moment. What did I do? And I can go back now with the journal, especially. It's much easier. I can go back and see, what did I do? What were the steps? But when you get through something like that, you become a lot more confident. And that's the thing that you can't pay money for, is confidence. And you know, after going through that, I'm like, okay, now whenever things start to not do so well, I have the knowledge. I know what I need to do. I don't know what I need to do necessarily, but I know what I need to think about. And again, sales funnels is generally what I come back to. Where am I weak? Where am I strong? What things do I need to give a shot,